Why don't we go to Utah?
Okay, let's do it.
Why don't we start with the obvious here with Utah, who went 11-2 last year, 7-2 in conference. Kyle Whittingham was there for 21 years. Perhaps, Dan, perhaps against his will, the university decided it was time to pass the baton over to Morgan Scalley, who had been the coach in waiting for a while. Yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, offered him 1 year instead of a new deal. Yeah.
Wits, now with Michigan, and took a handful of players and staff with him. What's left now for Morgan Scalley is, I think, first and foremost, a chance to give Utah a fresh start. But he's going to have to do so with new coordinators, 8 new position coaches, a lot new along both the lines, which I want to get into here. It's that last part in particular, I'd say, about the lines.
Yep.
That concerns me the most because, as you know, that's been a big part of the Utah identity over the Whittingham years. That's part of the reason why they've always been so steady, because of the line play. So maybe we can start there, because the way I see it, 5 new starters along the offensive line this season. It seems like there is an open debate among other people who have authored previews on how much of the Utah identity can be retained given the amount of turnover that we're seeing, certainly on the offensive side, but on the defensive side as well. Just in general, the trenches being so volatile this year as compared to previous years, there's an open question there about what does this new version of Utah look like moving forward.
Yeah, also new offensive line coach. I think with some 7 or 8 new assistants, position coaches
8 new
in
assistants,
total.
Yep, 8 new assistants.
Obviously, 2 new coordinators under Morgan Scalley. So this is a new look Utah program. Even though there are familiar pieces and pieces with experience here, this is a reset. I think this is a fair to say reset, though the pieces there and the pieces that return seem to be of quality. But you're right. When you've looked at Utah over the years, when they're not catastrophically injured, which has happened 1 or 2 times recently.
Unfortunately, yeah.
There's a steady stream of like, okay, this red shirt or this, rotation defensive lineman or group of them, they're now starting or they're now getting more time. Or this offensive lineman who subbed in at left guard because of injury and became a full-time starter 5 games left in the season, he's now starting. Or this tight end who was in 12 personnel, he's now the main guy. He's now tight end 1. That there was this steady stream of next man up with experience at Utah. There was just an unbelievable amount of continuity. Or, in the secondary, you'd always see those dudes stepping up. And
Yep.
It's just not that right now. It's just not that. I think they lost 20 dudes or something. It's 17 new players. There are familiar faces, but when you look at where they are at tight end, where they are on both lines, where they are in the secondary, the hallmark of the best of Utah these past few 10, 15 years is not there. Like, there is not that internal dynamic promotion kind of system anymore. And so, look, they're counting on Devon Dampier to take the next step forward as a more complete quarterback. I think that's reasonable to think he can, though, with the new offensive coordinator. Has a familiar running back next to him in Wayshawn Parker. That's great. Yep. But new receivers, new tight end, new system, and then a defense that's probably not going to be as helpful for the offense's cause as it's traditionally been when healthy. And so what does he look like as a more mature quarterback in reading more defenses and, the composure in the pocket instead of trying to force everything himself? And then defensively, it's still Morgan Scalley. It's still his vision for the defense, but he's not the day-to-day guy. And so with a new defensive line, a lot of transfers, linebackers, I think, in okay shape. Secondary, I want to give the benefit of the doubt to, but it's transfers once again. And the development there has been quite good over the years, but so many new names everywhere kind of tells me Utah will be good, but with some issues that are still going to linger later on into the season. I have them, and I'm looking at their schedule, in like an 8-win zone. Look, if they're fine, not great, but fine, starting out 4-0, 5-0, 6-0 against this schedule seems okay, seems reasonable. It gets a lot more difficult in the back half. Houston, at Cincinnati, BYU, at Arizona, at TCU, West Virginia to finish out the season, whatever West Virginia is. But unless there are catastrophic issues immediately, they should be ranked in like the high teens, like 18, 19, low 20s, purely based on brand name and record, not necessarily this year's actual quality.
Yeah, I think I'm on the over. Right now, the win total is 8.5. I'm on the over, but I'm kind of on the edge a little bit with that.
Okay.
For many of the reasons you described. Like, I spent a fair amount of time going through Utah trying to understand what it's going to look like, especially on offense this year. How different will it be? Because Jason Beck leaves, goes to Michigan with Whittingham. They hire Kevin McGivern as a new offensive coordinator who comes over from Utah State. And what I was picking up is that generally it should look very similar to what we saw last year.
Okay.
But our friend Brett Ciancia from Pick Six included a little nugget in his preview that Morgan Scalley wants to be more attacking and aggressive on offense.
Great.
On offense. Never saw that one coming. So vertical shots, trying to be more aggressive on offense. What does that look like with Devon Dampier?
Right.
And I know you alluded to him having Wayshawn Parker with him in the backfield. Obviously, Utah fans are hoping that Devon Dampier can take another step forward with his development as a quarterback. I think all of that, as you mentioned, is reasonable.
And it should be mentioned, was playing beat up for a good chunk of last year.
It was very beat up.
Yeah.
It was very beat up. But what does it look like if you try to get a little bit more aggressive and you're in a situation like Utah is this year where you lose your top 3 pass catchers from a year ago and suddenly all your starters are transfers from like Mountain West schools. Good players from the Mountain West. I'm not demeaning them at all, and this is their shot. Good for them. But there's just so much different that it's really hard to hang your hat on Utah getting back to like where they were a year ago, which was an 11-2 season. I don't see that in the cards for them in 2026. I think 8.5 is probably the right number. I tend to go a little bit higher than that. I would say 9-3 for me, but I understand why you might fall short of that number, just because what is the identity, right? As I said at the top, what is the identity and how much of the old identity is going to carry into this new regime?
Right. And typically, maybe not typically, but there are situations in which, okay, there is an obvious internal candidate. In the case of Morgan Scalley, he was named the coach in waiting. But usually you do see a lot of continuity on the roster when there's a coach who the roster is familiar with. Now, maybe last year with where the offensive line was age-wise and where the defense was in terms of experience and age, maybe it was never going to have a ton of continuity. But a lot of the dudes who you would have said, okay, there's star power here, there's potential star power there because they're back, those guys left.
Well, it's funny you say that because one of the things that I flagged here in my notes, just looking at the defensive line, there is an obvious question about pass rush and how, where are they going to generate that pressure from? There's also a very big question, a void of sorts along that line in terms of just star power.
Right.
Who am I hanging my hat on here? And they will probably develop. Again, this has been a program that's been very successful at developing that side of the football and has made hay by being very good in the trenches. But some of those guys went elsewhere, went with Witt to Michigan. It's a little bit unclear to me if they're going to.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's an unusual situation. I mean, maybe a little bit more common now of a coach leaving a big place for another big place. We've seen it more recently with guys like Lincoln Riley and Brian Kelly, Lane Kiffin now. But yeah, typically when there is that new coach, the internal promotion, you're like, okay, well, he recruited a lot of these guys and is familiar with a lot of these guys. They're familiar with him. It's a reset on 2 different levels, which tells me I think we're getting a step back here. I think last year was kind of a special year offensively. What did you say that it was 8.5?
8.5, yeah.
I think I might take the under. I think I have like 8-4. I think I'm on that other side for me. On that side,
I'm gonna go. I'll stick with what I jotted down here at 9-3. But it's an easy case to make that it's just 8 wins and not 9. Yeah,
if they can look, it's Idaho, Arkansas, Utah State, Iowa State. Those are all winnable games.
Those are
first year Arkansas coach. Yeah. Kansas might still need time at that point, working in new defense, new quarterback. Colorado, a ton of questions. And that gets us to October 24th, with no obvious like, oh, this team is built in a way that they could take advantage of like Utah deficiencies. Houston at home, which I appreciate as like maybe that's a 50-50 moment. Cincinnati on the road could be tricky depending on where this offense is, but Cincinnati has a good offensive line. BYU at Arizona at TCU is a stretch where like, man, if they can come away from that 2-1, West Virginia at home after at TCU, I don't know if that's a letdown moment, but it just feels as if like there are too many pop needs for this Utah team, even with the schedule that seems workable.